Hey everyone, and welcome back. We love to get into the nitty-gritty here, so today we're going dip on something. You wrestle with it every single day, whether you realize it or not. It's that push and pull between what you want and all the rules of the world around you.
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? The terms we're using to look at this whole thing are individual agency and orders.
Yeah,
And it's not some abstract philosophy.
yeah,
It really is baked into how we live and work and interact with each other every single day.
exactly. I don't know, I was thinking about this the other day. Even something as basic as whether to hit snooze or jump out of bed,
Yeah.
it's kind of a mini version of this whole thing.
Really?
Yeah, because it's your desire that you want a few more minutes of sleep, but then there's the order of your work schedule and all that.
That's a perfect example. And it's funny because the source material we've been looking at actually highlights how this tension, this push and pull, plays out across our entire lifespan. You start as a little kid, full of that natural drive, to explore and assert your will.
Oh, for sure.
Remember that classic image? The child gleefully jumping in a muddy puddle.
Oh.
That's individual agency
Rah.
at its purest.
Yeah, I can picture it perfectly.
Yeah.
And I'm also picturing the parent right behind them saying, "Don't get your clothes dirty."
Exactly. And those parental warnings and rules, those represent the orders, right? The boundaries and expectations on us. But here's what gets interesting. As we move through adolescence into adulthood, those orders evolve too. They become more complex. Instead of muddy puddles, we're grappling with, you know, career choices, societal expectations, even the pressure to conform to certain ideas of success.
Yeah, it's like the stakes get higher as we get older, and
Yeah.
sometimes those orders can feel really restrictive, even if they're well-intentioned.
Absolutely. In fact, the source material gives this example of someone stuck in a job that's safe but unfulfilling, and their individual agency is like screaming at them to pursue their passion, even if it means like taking a financial risk, right? But then you have the orders of financial security, family obligations, maybe even a fear of judgment from others.
Oh, yeah, it's that constant battle between what you want to do and what you feel you should do.
Exactly.
It's making me think, though, about how this plays out so differently across cultures. What might feel stifling in one society could be completely normal in another.
Absolutely. And the source material actually draws this really clear contrast between like individualistic cultures. The United States is a prime example where personal freedom and achievement are really highly valued versus more collectivist cultures where group harmony and social responsibility
Yeah.
often take precedence.
So even something as personal as choosing a marriage partner, which to me screams individual agency, could be super heavily influenced by these cultural orders.
100%. Think about arranged marriages, a practice that might seem unimaginable to some, but it reflects a different set of values and priorities.
That's true.
It's a powerful illustration of how those cultural orders shape our lives in such profound ways.
Wow, yeah. I hadn't thought about it quite like that. It's almost as if where you are in the world or even your own family history kind of presets the volume on either individual desires or the expectations placed upon you.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a preset. Yeah.
And that brings up another piece of this whole thing, how gender has impacted this whole dynamic historically.
Oh, absolutely crucial. For centuries, societal orders place so many constraints on women's individual agency, especially in education, career choices, even political participation.
It's like women were expected to fit into these predefined roles, their individual aspirations kind of taking a back seat to what society expected of them.
Exactly. But thankfully, we've seen so much progress in challenging those restrictive orders, and the source material actually points to something really specific. The increasing number of women running for political office, which was once largely off limits.
It really is a testament to how movements for gender equality are all about empowering women to exercise their individual agency.
Right, to rewrite the script of what's possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And this speaks to a bigger point here, that this balance between individual agency and orders, it's not static. It shifts and evolves over time and even across different stages of our lives.
That's a really great point. I mean, think about it. Kids have to follow rules set by adults. It's like their individual agency is on a shorter leash, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And then as we mature, we gain more autonomy and opportunities to exercise our individual agency, maybe even influence the very orders that govern us,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Okay, that makes sense. But it also makes me wonder, are there ever situations where those orders, those external structures, should just take priority, no matter what we might want individually?
That's a really good question. There are definitely times when those orders are absolutely crucial. Think about public safety. traffic laws, emergency protocols. These things exist to protect us, even if they sometimes feel like they're cramping our style.
Okay, yeah. Like I get annoyed at red lights sometimes, but I also know they prevent accidents, so it's for the greater good, right?
Exactly. They might be frustrating in the moment, but they ultimately help maintain order and prevent chaos. And it's not just traffic laws. Think about social stability. Legal systems, contracts, these things, provide a framework for how we interact with each other, ensuring fairness and preventing exploitation.
So in those cases, the orders are kind of like the guardrails, keeping us from veering off the road.
Perfect analogy. They provide structure and predictability, allowing society to function smoothly. And then there's collective action. Think about things like the military or scientific research. These endeavors require individuals to surrender some of their autonomy to achieve a larger goal.
So it's like sometimes those orders are necessary for us to accomplish things we couldn't do on our own.
Precisely. They enable us to work together towards a shared purpose, whether it's defending our nation or pushing the boundaries of scientific knowledge.
Okay, so we've got these situations where those external orders are really important, even essential. But are there times when our individual desires, our individual agency, should take precedence? Like, when should we prioritize our own wants over those expectations or rules?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another crucial aspect of this whole dynamic. There are absolutely times when individual agency should be the driving force, when personal choice is paramount.
Okay, like when?
Well, think about things like forming relationships, choosing our friends, our partners. That's a realm where individual agency should reign supreme. We shouldn't be forced into relationships or told who to love.
Right, because those connections are so personal, so central to who we are.
Exactly. And it's not just romantic relationships. It's about choosing who we want to spend our time with, who we let into our lives.
So our individual desires should guide those choices, not some external set of rules.
Precisely. And this also applies to expressing our creativity, pursuing our passions, exploring different art forms, finding ways to share our unique talents with the world. These are all expressions of individual agency, and stifling them can have a real impact on our well-being.
It's like trying to force someone into a creative box they don't fit in.
Exactly. It's about allowing that individual spark to shine through, to contribute to the richness and diversity of human experience.
I love that. And it makes me think about another situation where individual agency is super important, making moral decisions.
Oh, absolutely. When faced with ethical dilemmas, it's our individual conscience that should guide us, not blind obedience to authority or rules.
Right, like what if those orders, those rules are actually immoral or illegal?
That's a perfect example. There are times when those orders go against our deepest values, our sense of what's right and wrong. And in those moments, it's our individual agency, our courage to stand up for what we believe in that can be a powerful force for change.
It's like sometimes those orders need to be challenged, even broken, to create a more just and ethical world.
Exactly. Think about all the social movements throughout history that have challenged oppressive laws and systems. Those movements were fueled by individuals who refused to conform, who dared to exercise their agency and demand something better.
So it's not just about following rules blindly. It's about using our individual agency to discern when those orders need to be questioned, challenged, or even overturned.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're not just passive recipients of these orders. We have a responsibility to engage with them critically, to evaluate whether they align with our values, and to act accordingly.
And that makes me think about how this whole individual agency versus orders thing isn't just a static concept. It's a dynamic tension that's been playing out throughout human history.
You're absolutely right. Human history is full of this back and forth between individual freedom and societal needs. Think about the Magna Carta, the French Revolution, the American Civil Rights Movement. All of these were driven by this fundamental tension.
Wow, so it's like this struggle is woven into the very fabric of who we are as a species.
Exactly. It's a fundamental part of the human experience. And it's playing out right now in countless ways all around us.
That's true. It's in our political debates, our social movements, even the choices we make every day.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that there's no single right answer to this dilemma. The optimal balance between individual agency and orders will always depend on context, values, and the specific situation at hand.
So what you're saying is there's no magic formula.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot that allows both individuals and society to flourish. And that sweet spot will likely look different depending on the issue, the culture, and even the individuals involved.
So it's about recognizing that this tension is a constant negotiation.
Absolutely. A negotiation between our own desires and the needs of the community, between individual freedom and the common good.
It's about finding that balance where we can thrive as individuals without undermining the well-being of others.
Exactly. And that balance is constantly evolving. What might have been considered an acceptable order a century ago might be seen as completely unjust today.
That's a great point. Like, societal norms and expectations are always shifting, right?
Exactly. And it's up to each of us to engage in this ongoing dialogue, to question those orders that no longer serve us, and to advocate for a world that allows for both individual expression and collective well-being.
So it's not just about understanding this concept, it's about putting it into practice in our own lives.
Absolutely. It's about reflecting on our own values, considering the impact of our choices, and engaging in thoughtful dialogue about how we can create a more just and equitable society.
It sounds like this whole individual agency versus orders thing is a lot more nuanced than it might seem at first glance.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But I think we've done a good job of unpacking some of that nuance today.
I agree. And I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
We definitely have. And there's still more to explore. But I think it's a good place to pause for now. We'll be back soon to continue this fascinating deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive. I feel like we're really getting into it now.
I know, right? We've already uncovered so much, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Because this tension between individual agency and orders really is embedded in like every aspect of human experience.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What other layers are we peeling back today?
Well, let's circle back to this idea of finding the right balance, that sweet spot between individual desires and societal needs. We've talked about how cultural context matters, but our source material also really emphasizes something else, the role of our own personal values. What matters most to you will likely influence how you view this whole dynamic.
That makes sense. I mean, someone who really values personal freedom above everything else will probably have a very different perspective than someone who puts a lot of weight on, like, social harmony and tradition, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And those values are often shaped by all sorts of things, our upbringing, our cultural background, even our own life experiences.
Oh, for sure.
What might feel like a total infringement on individual agency to one person could be seen as a necessary order by someone else.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Can you give us a specific example of how those different values come into play?
Oh, absolutely. Let's take like raising children. Some parents might really prioritize instilling a strong sense of independence and self-reliance in their kids. They encourage them to like make their own choices from a young age, even if it means making mistakes. That reflects a high value on individual agency.
Right. It's kind of like that free-range parenting approach, let kids explore and learn from their own experiences.
Exactly. But then you have other parents who might prioritize things like obedience and adherence to rules. They might believe that, a structured environment with really clear boundaries is essential for development.
Yeah. And it's not like one is right and one is wrong, is it?
No, not at all. It really comes down to the values that are driving those parenting choices.
That's true.
And these value systems extend far beyond just parenting. They influence how we view so many things: political systems, social issues, even personal relationships.
Okay, so understanding our own values is key to navigating this tension then.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It helps us figure out where we draw the line, when we're willing to compromise, and when we need to really stand our ground. It's about like self-awareness
Right.
and recognizing that what matters most to us might not be the top priority for someone else, and that's okay.
It makes me think this whole individual agency versus orders thing is less about finding the right answer and more about just embracing the complexity of it all.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about, engaging in that thoughtful dialogue, respecting different perspectives, and recognizing that the right balance is fluid.
Yeah.
It depends on the situation.
It's finding that sweet spot where individual freedom and collective well-being can coexist.
Right.
Which is a pretty tall order.
I love it. And speaking of finding that sweet spot, let's look at another real-world scenario here. Imagine that you're passionate about, let's say, environmental sustainability, and you really believe in individual responsibility for reducing, our carbon footprint. That's a powerful expression of individual agency.
Right, like choosing to bike to work instead of driving, or really being conscious of how much you're consuming.
Yeah. Or, cutting down on single-use plastics.
Yeah.
Those individual choices add up.
For sure.
But you also recognize that, systemic change is needed to address the larger issue of climate change.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So you might, advocate for government policies that promote renewable energy.
Yep.
or support businesses that are committed to sustainable practices. That's where the orders come in.
Yeah, because it creates that framework.
Exactly. It encourages or incentivizes that collective action.
So it's recognizing that both individual actions and systemic changes are necessary to tackle these big issues.
Exactly. And this interplay is relevant to countless issues. Social justice, healthcare, education, you name it. It's all about finding that balance between personal responsibility and advocating for those structures that support everyone.
So we're always kind of fine-tuning that dial between individual agency and orders, huh?
I love that. Yeah. Fine-tuning that dial.
Trying to find that sweet spot.
Yeah. That's where we can thrive, both as individuals and as a society.
And I think that's what makes this whole conversation so fascinating. The source material really highlights how this dynamic tension has been a driving force behind social progress throughout history, like challenging oppressive orders and demanding greater individual freedoms have often been catalysts for real positive change.
100%. Think about, the civil rights movement, the fight for women's suffrage. These were all movements fueled by people exercising their individual agency to demand a more just and equitable society.
And even today, we see this tension playing out, right, in all sorts of movements.
Yeah. Movements for LGBTQ plus rights, racial justice, environmental protection.
It's people leveraging their individual agency to push for that systemic change.
Right. Challenging the status quo, demanding a better world.
It's inspiring to see how individual agency can be that force for good.
Yeah.
But we also have to acknowledge that, unchecked individualism can have its downsides too.
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial point. While individual agency is essential for personal fulfillment and, pushing society forward, it needs to be tempered with a sense of responsibility towards others.
Right. Like if everyone's solely focused on their own needs and desires without considering the impact on others, it can lead to chaos and social breakdown.
That's true. It's like that old saying, your freedom to swing your fist ends where my nose begins.
Huh. Exactly.
Right. So unbridled individual agency without regard for the common good can be detrimental. In fact, the source material even mentions the tragedy of the commons,
Oh, yeah.
where individuals acting in their own self-interest ultimately deplete a shared resource, harming everyone in the process.
It's like overfishing or something.
Except,
Okay, so it's really about finding that balance, recognizing that our choices always have consequences.
consequences that extend beyond ourselves.
Yes.
And that brings us to, I think, a really important question. What happens when individual agency and those orders clash, head on?
Oh, yeah. What happens when your deeply held beliefs or desires are just in direct conflict with the rules or expectations that are imposed upon you?
Right. It's something we've probably all faced at some point.
Oh, for sure. It could be something small, like disagreeing with a dress code at work, or something huge, like objecting to a law you think is unjust.
Exactly.
So how do we navigate those situations where our individual agency bumps up against the orders we're expected to follow?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. I think the best approach really depends on the specific circumstances. But one key factor is understanding the potential consequences of your actions.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes it's worth pushing back against those orders, even if it means facing repercussions, right? But other times, it might be smarter to find a way to work within the system or to seek out alternative solutions.
Exactly. It's about weighing those potential benefits and risks. And sometimes, choosing your battles wisely.
So it's not always about outright rebellion. Sometimes it's about finding creative ways to exercise your agency within those constraints.
They can take many forms, right?
Yeah.
It can be engaging in respectful dialogue, seeking compromise, or, finding ways to actually influence change from within the system.
Okay, so it's like this constant process of negotiation.
It is, yeah.
Both within ourselves and within the larger systems that we're a part of.
You've summed it up beautifully. We're not just passive recipients of these orders. We each have the power to shape our own lives and impact the world.
That's empowering.
Right. But we also need to acknowledge the importance of those structures and systems that provide a framework for order and stability.
It's finding that delicate balance between freedom and well-being.
Well said.
Recognizing that our choices have ripple effects.
Well said. And this brings us to one more crucial aspect I think we need to unpack.
Oh, what's that?
Power. How does power influence this whole balance between individual desires and societal expectations?
Oh, interesting. Because I remember earlier we were talking about how young people have less power to challenge those orders, right?
Exactly. They're subject to the authority of adults and institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And this power dynamic It extends far beyond just age. It's influenced by things like social class, race, gender, even physical ability.
Okay, so it's not just about my choices. It's
Right.
about recognizing that some folks face greater constraints on their agency because of these big systemic factors.
Exactly. Things that are often outside their control.
Yeah, and those systemic factors, they create real barriers for people. They limit opportunities, making it even harder for certain individuals to exercise their agency and really shape their own lives.
That adds a whole other layer to this whole thing.
It does. It's not just about me and what I want versus like what's expected of me. It's realizing that the playing field's not level to begin with.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And it underscores why we need to really look at those orders, those rules and systems, even traditions. Who benefits? Who gets squeezed out? How do they either reinforce or challenge those existing power dynamics?
So it's not enough to just advocate for more individual freedom.
Right.
We have to be mindful of the systems that might be creating inequalities.
100%.
Oh.
A real commitment to individual agency, I think, means working toward a society where everyone actually has a genuine chance to exercise it, regardless of their background.
Yeah, it's not about erasing all orders, but making sure they're not rigged against certain people.
That's it.
It makes this whole conversation feel much more tangible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's not just a concept we're discussing. It's actually playing out in our healthcare systems, our education systems, even our legal systems.
You're so right. And the source material gets into how this tension shows up in those exact areas.
Hmm.
Take healthcare, for example.
Yeah.
In a lot of countries, access to medical care is considered a right,
Right.
a service provided by the government.
Yeah.
That's a form of orders,
Yeah.
a system designed to meet this collective need.
Right. The idea being everyone deserves quality care no matter what.
Exactly. But even within that system, individuals still have choices.
Oh, for sure.
Which doctor to see, whether to pursue a particular treatment,
Right.
even exploring alternative therapies. Those are expressions of individual agency within the larger structure.
So it's that interplay again. The system, the orders are there, but you still have your individual rights.
Exactly.
Your right to make decisions within that framework.
100%. And this pops up in education, too. We have these mandatory schooling laws in so many places. It reflects the idea that education is crucial for progress.
Oh, yeah. Both for individuals and for society as a whole.
Right, exactly. So it's a form of orders. But within that structure, you still have a lot of individual choice. Choosing a school, specializing in certain subjects, figuring out your own path.
So you're driving your education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it goes even further, Think about our legal systems. We have laws and regulations to ensure fairness, order, protection of individual rights. All orders, providing a framework for how we interact.
Right. It's that old idea, without rules, we just descend into chaos.
Right. And yet within that legal framework, individuals are making decisions all the time.
Oh, for sure.
Whether to represent yourself or hire a lawyer, whether to accept a plea deal,
Yeah.
whether to appeal a verdict, all expressions of individual agency operating within that structure.
It really is amazing how this tension, this push and pull is woven into so many areas of life, even the ones that seem the most rigid,
It's fascinating, isn't it? And the source materials makes a really important point about all of this. Striking that balance is vital for a healthy society. Too much emphasis on orders can stifle so much innovation, creativity, that unique spark each person brings.
Yeah.
But too much unbridled individual agency can lead to chaos, disregard for others, even instability.
It's that tightrope analogy again, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
You need the structure of the rope,
Uh-huh.
but also that freedom to, make adjustments to stay balanced.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And as we're wrapping up here, I want to leave you with a final thought.
Okay.
Understanding this dynamic, this push and pull, it isn't just like a intellectual exercise. It's about recognizing the power we each have to both shape our own lives and impact the world around us.
It's that sweet spot
It is.
where our freedom and our responsibility to each other can work together.
Right. To create a world that's both just and vibrant.
I like that. It's a journey, not a destination.
That's it. And that balance is going to keep evolving as we face new challenges.
Yeah.
And as our values change.
So keep questioning,
Keep questioning.
keep exploring, and keep striving for that balance in your own life and in the world. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. We'll see you next time.
This is DigitView.